Hello everyone, this is Max from Technology of Winning. The question of free will has been coming up in my feed lately quite a lot, and undoubtedly it concerns many minds. There is a view which has been made popular by a great thinking and intellectual Sam Harris, which basically says that we don't have any free will.
You don't even feel that you have the freedom that you think you feel, because look, if I just pay attention to how I get to the end of this sentence, I don't know how I get to the end of the sentence.
If there's one thing I know, it's when I'm being with. It can't possibly. It can't.
I don't know how I get to the end of the sentence.
Maeve.
However, listening to his arguments or discussing it with my friends, I often come to this feeling that while those conclusions sound logical inside this special perspective that he takes, it doesn't actually make any difference on the practical reality, and none of the conclusions that come out of that perspective actually make any practical change whatsoever. But at the same time, this message kept popping up, and there are obviously people who really listen to this message and are getting something out of it. So I really had to take this question and get to the bottom of what I really think about free will. So in the first part of this video, I'm going to be taking a logical approach to seeing if these arguments are actually coherent. And in the last third part of the video, I will be taking a more spiritual perspective and seeing where does this message come from spiritually and where does it fit in the bigger picture. So if you hear the logical part and you feel like you're already light years ahead in your journey, and you don't really need those logical thoughts, just go ahead and skip to the last part of the video. So Sam starts his explanation of arguments against free will with a little thinking experiment where he asks you to pick a city in your mind, which is supposed to be a representation of a free choice. Then he tries to look at your objective experience of that choice, what things light up in your mind and how you are experiencing this process. He argues that most often, in most people, they will only get 2 or 3 cities will light up in their consciousness mind as thoughts or as specific names, and then people choose between them. And then he argues that since the other 200 or 300 cities did not even light up in their mind, then it wasn't really a free choice because they only got to be choosing between those 3 cities. So the first thing I have to really question here is whether the subjective perception of some process, be it free or not, is really the best or the most reliable way of figuring out how that process works. I mean, for example, if you want to figure out if I am smart or not for some job, you might, for example, give me an IQ test or some other test, and then from that test, you would get some objective information. But you wouldn't just ask me whether I subjectively feel smart or not. I mean, that really tells you nothing. Subjectively, I can feel like I'm smart or dumb or good or evil. Subjectively, I can feel like I'm an attack helicopter. And this can change from day to day, from hour to hour. This depends on a lot of things going on in my consciousness. And even in the case of just choosing a city, I would say that this is more a question of how conscious I am of all the different processes going on in my consciousness, not how free they are. Another quite substantial cornerstone in his argument are the scientific experiments which have been showing that scientists can predict what a person is going to choose in a simple situation before the person subjectively feels like they have chosen it. So basically every time you hear that neuroscience has proven that there's no free will or that there is scientific experimental evidence for lack of free will, these are usually the experiments they talk about. However, when you dig even a little bit deeper into how these experiments are set up, you can quickly see that they have little to do with actual free will. The most commonly known experiment was done by someone called Benjamin Libet, and it was set up like this. First, they give a subject a choice of pressing one of 2 buttons. That's supposed to be the free choice that they are making in this experiment. Then they have devised some sort of clever way of measuring when the subject actually feels that they are done, that they are ready to make their choice. They are usually some letters presented on the screen which change very rapidly, and the subject is asked to remember the last letter that they saw when they feel like they made the choice. And then finally, of course, to check all of this, they have an EEG machine or some other machine which measures signals in the subject's brain to try to predict from the signals also what the subject is going to choose, which button they're going to press. And of course, unsurprisingly, the EEG machine can tell which button the subject is going to choose before the subject feels like they have chosen a specific button. So again, this is going by subjective experience. This tells me nothing about how free that choice was. That simply tells me that inside the consciousness process of subject, there are parts of which they are conscious and there are parts of which they are unconscious. The unconscious parts are still part of me. It's not part of another human being. It's not part of another machine. It's not part of some other entity. They are still part of me. If I just lift my hands like this, I don't actually know the names of any of the muscles that my body uses. I don't know how many they are. I don't know how I do it. I don't know what the electrical signal looks like. But this is a very weak argument against me not having free will to raise my arms. If I don't know the names of those muscles, or if I don't know the next word that I'm going to use in a sentence, or stylistic choice, or which language I'm going to use for some thought, that's because I already have a system inside me that handles it for me. Those are just implementation details of my will. I already have tons of systems that do all kinds of stuff for me. I don't have to go in every single detail. There is no need for me to do that. So I guess the main issue I have with the no free will argument is that it's not actually useful in any way. Many of the things inside this argument, they actually make coherent sense if you go into this bubble of logic that you are asked to go into. Inside that bubble, they make perfect sense. But once you start applying this bubble on larger life, they don't. And in general, watching many of his videos and how he describes it, I get this feeling of being stuck in someone's mind.
There's also a voice in your head that is just saying things. Thoughts just emerge in consciousness. We are not authoring them. That would require that we think them before we think them. If you don't know what your soul is going to do next, you're not in control of your soul.
Actually, if you ever happen to watch some highly smart or intelligent or thinking person go, for example, on an acid trip or just simply be really tired, this is usually how they talk. They get stuck in certain thinking patterns.
But we can't choose what we choose in life. And when it seems that we choose what we choose, so perhaps when going back and forth between two options, we don't choose to choose what we choose.
That's appealing a gland. Finish the story! What happened? What about the glands? Jesus, that stuff got right on top of you.
So yeah, this is the main issue I have with this argument of no free will. It's that it's not useful. It's not that I didn't understand it, or that I didn't study the idea of determinism, or that I feel uncomfortable somehow thinking that I don't have free will. It's just that it's not useful. Not for my personal life, not for someone else's life. It's not even that useful for science. The explanation of why I do something, of, oh, it's because your DNA and some neurons and some experiences and some prior causes, can actually be used in very, very few cases. It's actually extremely vague in 99.9% of life. It might sound extremely scientific and based on facts, but we don't have those facts in life. And without those facts, it just becomes extremely vague scientific way of saying, God knows why it happened. I mean, in my life, I go out and I meet real people and I interact with them as real people having free will. I don't split them up in 100 different thoughts of why they might do this or why they might do that. I don't split them up in millions of prior causes. I don't treat them as a science project or as an Excel sheet calculating what they're going to do next. And by the way, if you do that with people, they notice very quickly, and there is a very small number of people that will put up with that. It's the people who do the same thing, who can't see the other way of communicating. This happens with choices that we all make every day. Your lover or family member says something and suddenly you feel withdrawn, you feel like something has happened. You have to deal with that right now. Or your project stops working and you feel depressed. Or some situation in your company and you have to hire someone or fire someone really, really quickly. You have to take decision at that point in time. You have to make a choice. You have to take responsibility for that. You don't actually have time for Sam Harris to build this magical MRI machine that is going to scan every neuron and every atom in someone's mind and explain to you what their regressions and what their source code is. Oh, and by the way, this is quite interesting. This magical machine that Sam mentions quite a lot. This is not some random thought that he has. He brings this machine up as an example in many, many of his arguments. This machine that can deterministically predict the atomic chaos and exactly predict what's going to happen is not going to be built this year, next year, in 10 years, 100. It's not going to be built in a million years. This is not because we lack technology to do it. This is a fundamental truth about our physical universe. The machine that would be able to do that would need to be bigger than the universe itself. To observe one particle, you need a machine made up of several particles. By observing it, you're changing its properties. You're collapsing its wave function, and now it's not even the same particle that was before you started observing it. This is a fundamental quality of reality. This is not our lack of technology. And this quality of reality, it comes from our own science. It doesn't come from new agey woo-woo types that say, oh, reality is this and that. These are physical facts that we cannot build this machine. What this basically means is that you cannot predict universe. It's not determined. It does not know itself what is going to happen. It's not that humans don't know what the universe is going to do. It's that the universe itself does not know yet what it's going to do. It actually has to play out in order to find out what it's going to do. And you having a free will in this is not just some passive bystander. Your free will is actually a big part of this playing out. The universe needs your free will to play out in the way that it wants to play out itself. And by the way, speaking of feeling uncomfortable with certain ideas, what if it's not the free will people who feel uncomfortable thinking that they don't have free will? What if it's actually the people who like determinism and who like the idea that everything can be determined and predicted, and someday science will make this machine that will take all the chaos out of life? People who like the idea that you can understand life with logic. What if it's those people that are actually uncomfortable when you tell them that they do have free will and they need to use it? They need to take their own responsibility for their own free will to use it. That you can't actually think your way out through all of life, that thinking only works for a small subset of problems. And then the rest, you have to take chances and you have to take responsibility. But anyway, so enough with the logic now. Why does this message keep coming up? Why is there an audience for it? Where is the truth in it? What are people getting out of hearing this message? Why does the collective consciousness that we're all part of, why does it entertain this thought? It seems to me that most of the time when people report how good they started feeling after starting to think this way is when it helped them to escape some old rigid thinking patterns. For example, Sam himself will often talk about old religions like Christianity or Islam, and how he sees that so many of those things are still affecting our society when in today's day and age they really shouldn't be. And other people say similar things as well. For someone who was thinking that they have to be behaving according to this dogma and think according to this dogma, and this dogma is the only way of thinking about life, to actually say that there is no free will and all of the religious stuff which is based on free will is just BS, and divinity is BS, and the deeper meaning is BS, it can actually be a good forward-going liberating step. It's actually a step that makes them more free, that propels forward their awakening. And they feel this. They feel this with this idea that they are getting more choices, that they are becoming more free with it. I think these are the people who laugh at religious satire like this.
Hey, just take in the back, you play catch with them. That's it. You talk about life, right? What's that, son? We're not going to church today. Fuck that. That's all a bunch of bullshit. God's everywhere, but I got to go down there to see him? Really? And he's mad at me down there and I owe you money? Go yourself. Just cry. That's stupid. It's ridiculous. It's in here, all right? It's not down, it's in here. They try to take it. It's in here. You do something good, you feel good. You do something bad, you feel bad, you know?
The problem with that is that when you start denying free will along with those other old dogmas, you have actually given up your own agency in the process. You have given up your own responsibility for your own choices. This denial actually, in effect, becomes just a next level of ego, next level of dogma, next level of thinking, next level of living your life through thoughts, through thinking process. Because most actual spiritual growth doesn't come from just one moment of relinquishing an old ego idea and suddenly coming to the new world. Real growth comes from relinquishing this ego over and over again, every day. There isn't just one ego to get away from, it's the process itself that one starts learning, giving up all these egos, and what starts to become better at it and faster at it. And so saying that there is no free will basically relinquishes you of responsibility. Now, if you were stuck thinking that you are responsible for someone else's old ideas or some of your own old ideas, that's a good, freeing, liberating step. But only if you actually take care to take up new responsibilities for new things that you actually believe in. For example, many people say that if you don't see people as having free will, it's actually easier to be compassionate towards them. That if someone hurts them, for example, if they think that this person didn't actually mean to hurt them and instead it was just bad parenting or some other prior causes or some trauma in their life, then it's easier to feel compassionate to the actual person doing it. It's kinda a little bit easier, but that's like only the first step of compassion. That's not real compassion by any stretch. If you interact or connect with me and your attitude or your energy towards me is that I don't have free will and that I am simply a set of some prior causes, that's not real compassion. That's not even real connection. You are not seeing me as an actual human that communicates with you. You are not giving me an opportunity to grow, to show myself, to connect with you. And you can't actually love a set of prior causes. If your worldview doesn't support free will, if the game that you are playing in your head doesn't have the function of free will, then this is what you subconsciously do to people that you interact with, because you don't believe that they have free will either. Real compassion is more like, if this person have hurt you, you see that they do have free will, and they still have hurt you, and you still develop actual love and compassion towards them. That's difficult. That's real change. That's real growth. If I instead try to get rid of free will, it's like me just basically doing this mental logical trick where I just say that those feelings should not exist, that there is no real reason to feel bad. I just said it logically. I didn't take those feelings and integrated them. It didn't come from the heart. I just basically said, oh, I have those feelings, but they should not exist. thinking that my logical conclusions and thoughts are going to love this person for me. That's like trying to outsource love into a clever logical model of prior causes. It doesn't work. I really feel that seeing people as having free will and actually taking real responsibility to develop real connection and real compassion and real love towards them, that's a basis for real communication in a meaningful way with living human beings. As always, thanks you guys for listening. Please comment or leave some feedback. I hope that this video helped you or at least made you think. And I will see you guys next time.